Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast. Today it is Monday, the 23rd of May, 2022. And joining us on the show, as he does every single week, it is Matt Weyrich. We've got Juan Soto to talk about. We've got Cesar Hernandez to talk about, a national series with the Brewers that just wrapped up, and a Dodger series to preview as well. So a whole lot coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here with Matt Weyrich of NBC Sports Washington, joining us as he does every single week. But Matt, the results right now of the Nationals aren't very good. We'll get to those in a second, but they haven't been for a while. The Juan Soto trade rumor stuff really heated up last week because Buster Olney spoke to rival execs that said the Nationals, I think the quote was, might be compelled to trade him. My overall thought was, hey, look, this is, it's obviously it's a good piece. It was on ESPN Plus though, so you got to think like they're putting this stuff behind a paywall, so it's more of a conversational article, right? As opposed to news there. But it got the machine going. I mean, I got texts about trade packages. I saw tweets about Juan Soto's face I saw in a Padres jersey. I saw him in a Blue Jays jersey. What was yours? My thought was, what's changed besides the Nationals are bad, but we thought they'd be bad? What's changed really in this whole calculation?
Yes, the piece comes out. Nationals might be motivated to trade him, coming from, as you said, rival execs, which it's all speculation at this point. I mean, wouldn't it be convenient for these rival execs if Juan Soto were to be on the trade market? I think so. Nobody from the National side has put out anything that seems to indicate they're even remotely interested in trading him. Multiple pieces have come out in the days since, kind of squashing those rumors, saying that the Nationals are not interested in trading him at this point. And really, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, the Nationals want to extend him. They don't want to go into a long-term rebuild. And if you were to trade Soto, that's exactly what would happen. I mean, they're looking at, probably returning to contention within 3 years. And if you trade Soto, that probably pushes that target date back to more like 4 or 5 years at the earliest. So it really just doesn't fall in line with what we've seen from the Nationals. And then, of course, there's the ownership question. And, I think that with the team potentially changing hands in the next 12 months, would the Lerners really want their last move as owners to be trading their franchise player and tainting their legacy that includes winning a World Series? Probably not. Would new ownership group that comes in really want their first move to be trading a player who's beloved and a generational talent? Probably not. So, I think at this point, where the Nationals are in their contention window with the looming ownership change potentially happening, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense for them to trade him at this point. I think the only way that the Nationals do trade him is if they go to him and say, look, we're willing to meet market price. We're going to throw you $450 million, $475 million, $500 million, whatever it takes. And if he still says no to all of that, and they're then maybe a year and a half, 2 years out from his free agency, and they think there's no shot of extending him, then maybe you consider a trade. But with him 2.5 years away from free agency right now, and them still in what you probably categorize as the early stages of talks, I just don't think that it makes a whole lot of sense for him to trade him at this point.
Well, especially when there's regime changes coming. Usually have it seems like it could be ownership, front office, and manager. Obviously we heard the news about, I think the speculation kind of was Dave Martinez and Rizzo were kind of on the same track, right? That was kind of the prevailing thought. Was confirmed last week. But to me, when those changes are on the horizon, you usually don't think that the outgoing group is going to get to do make a lot of changes, right? You don't have, for NFL example, you don't have an outgoing front office draft for you. It's happened before. It's always a disaster and a calamity, but you don't have a coaching staff and a front office that's not going to be there, make major decisions just to not be there and put that on somebody else. And if it's a 3-layered change, ownership, front office, management, and on-field management, they're definitely not going to do it, right? I mean, it would make no sense. Also, if you're going to sell a team, we've mentioned this a lot. It makes no sense to sell the most valuable asset in the team. I mean, Soto is what could change the value of this team. Now, like, yeah, this person's going to be able to, or a group is going to be able to make the decision on whether or not they want to saddle themselves with a massive contract, but also it's a, amazing asset will help you build a team faster. So I can't see that happening right now as much as rival execs or decision makers or prognosticators might think. And I'm not saying Buster only did a bad job with this piece. I mean, I understand why he did it. I just think people took it way out of context and were like, I saw stuff that was like Soto's in the block. They made one offer. They've made one offer. If they quit after one offer, that's embarrassing.
Especially considering the offer. I mean, nobody's scoffing at 350 million, but let's be real, that's not market price for what Soto's worth. And
right.
With Scott Boras being his agent, that's the kind of deal that he's going to command. There is no hometown discount here. So the Nationals have to be realistic with themselves when it comes to Soto's future.
Yeah, so let's talk about another guy I wanted to mention too. We talked about Maikel Franco last week. Cesar Hernandez has been really strong for the Nats so far. He's we kind of tougher start. The month of May has been really strong for him. Bat average kind of stayed around the same place, but he's getting on base more often. He's being kind of more of a traditional leadoff hitter in some senses, but it's interesting. Dave Martinez tends to like guys who are a bit more aggressive, right, at that front spot. He hit Alcides Escobar there sometimes, right, last year. He's hitting Cesar Hernandez there now. Kyle Schwarber, obviously somebody who is very well known for his level of aggression at the plate. This is a team that usually does not shy away from hitting somebody who's aggressive at that spot. And so I think Cesar Hernandez is doing a little bit better job recently, especially in the month of May, of being a combination of both.
Yeah, he's not going to be hitting any home runs. He still doesn't have a single long ball on the season. But that was kind of the thing that the Nationals told him not to worry about. Last season he hit a career high 21 home runs, but his OPS was one of the worst of his career. And it was kind of because he was selling out for that power. And when you're selling out for power and you're only hitting 21 home runs, it probably means that's not your game. So the Nationals bring him back on a $4 million deal this season and say, look, we want you to be a table setter. We've got big bats behind you that are going to do damage. We just need you to get on base for him. And he got off to a slow start, kind of looked like the guy that he was last year, minus the power, to just kind of be an overall bad hitter. But like you said, so far in May, he's been pretty good. And, the Nationals certainly expected this out of him. Davey Martinez talked a lot about how, this is the kind of guy that he is. Mike Rizzo has the classic back of the baseball card line. And so far he's at least living up to their expectations there.
Yeah. And, this kind of gets to our conversation. Like, it's crazy for him. He's 32, but he's been in the league for a decade. I mean, he's been around for 10 years. And so it gets to the conversation of like, hey, what kind of asset is he, right? Do you think he is kind of a Josh Harrison type asset that we saw get traded last year? Is that kind of the type of guy where he can return you some prospect depth? Because I do think, to me, like, there's a certain amount of, yes, you want to get as many assets as possible, but to me, at a certain point, they do need to keep some major league type guys in the roster, right? Because some of the stuff we were seeing last week, and look, it wasn't all, there's some of the replacement level guys. Like, some of the defensive stuff last week was embarrassing. I think they had multiple plays that were on the not top 10, which, I know it's not a good metric for anything, but come on now. Like, we can't be having multiple plays in a week that end up on the not top 10. It's just bad look, you're pros. So what do you think about like the idea of, hey, nobody's unavailable, but we do need to keep some major league guys in the roster to help some young guys along?
Yeah, it's a difficult balance. We saw last summer, I should say, that Mike Rizzo, when he goes all in on something, he goes all in. I mean, he traded a lot of stars, a lot of veteran players who had been part of this team for a while. I don't think there's any reason to believe that the Nationals wouldn't be just as aggressive this year. I mean, obviously losing Carter Kieboom for the rest of the season to Tommy John surgery is kind of a blow, because if you were going to trade, say, Maikel Franco, he's a guy who would just slide right back in, as we talked about in the last episode before the news came out that he was hurt for the rest of the season. So you don't really have any immediate answers on the infield. I mean, they'd have to call up Lucius Fox if they were to trade Cesar Hernandez, and he would play second base. Because, I mean, I'm assuming Luis Garcia is up at the majors at this point. And then you really don't have anyone as an answer for third base. They don't have a single other infielder on the 40-man roster, besides Harry Adrianza, who I guess might be the guy that they have to kind of be as the veteran in the infield whenever he does come back. We haven't heard an update on him. Mental note now to ask Davey about that today.
Yeah, we haven't heard about him. I mean, I've
at all.
To be honest, I've completely forgotten he's part of the equation. Like
exactly
because I mean he hasn't been around the entire season.
Yeah, so we'll find out. I'll see if I can find that out today as to what kind of timeline we're looking at for him. Maybe he's, like you said, you need that veteran, somebody in the infield to kind of hold things down, be the leader, and especially if Josh Bell is gone, which you would figure that if Josh Bell is traded, their next first base option is probably Jake Noll, who, to his credit, has actually been hitting very well down in AAA. And if you were to trade a bunch of players, you'd probably have a spot or two open on the 40-man where you could finally elevate him back onto the roster and give him a chance to get some at-bats down the stretch, because he was their minor league player of the year last year. I mean, that's a title that Yadiel Hernandez has had in the past. There are guys who, will do that and, turn out to be not so bad. So I wouldn't say that anyone is off the table, especially if they are a free agent after this season. I think that if the Nationals can get something for them with the state of their farm system, they can't really afford to be that, conservative and hold on to guys.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's like one of those things where you give them another year. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, we're just going to give you another 1-year contract. But yeah, I mean, if you can get something out of it, because you can always sign somebody like that in free agency, right? So might as well do it. Do you kind of think though, like, do you think I'm wrong with a Josh Harrison type thing? Just kind of it's the level of player that he is on the open market.
Probably. I mean, he's making a little bit more this year, so money-wise, he's a little more expensive. He doesn't have as much versatility. Hernandez doesn't play in the outfield like Harrison does, but he does play both positions up the middle. He's probably a better second baseman than Josh Harrison was, even though Josh could play multiple positions and was fine at second base. Hernandez is pretty steady with the glove there overall. He's a former Gold Glove winner, so any team that kind of wants somebody to maybe be a utility player, somebody they can slide in, on a day where they need somebody else, so give somebody a day off, something like that. I think that he would make a lot of sense for a contender. So certainly think that he should be on the trade market if he's still hitting like he is.
All right, we're going to touch on the lineup here in 1 second. First, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to built.com today. It is built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com today. They've got different flavored Built Bars, always come out with new. They got brownie batter puffs right now. Cake batter puffs last week. I had them. They were excellent. They're all gone now from my stash. So you guys go to built.com today. It's built.com to find those. Get 15% off with promo code LOCKED15. They're delicious and good for you. Once again, promo code LOCKED15 at built.com today. All right, so we saw a lineup shakeup yesterday. And I will say that the funny part about it is the part of the lineup that I was actually impressed with yesterday was the part that was really unchanged, the back part. They turned that thing over in that fourth inning where they scored, was it 5 or 6 runs? So ironically enough, the lineup, it was nice to see them in the back part of that inning, the guys who kind of gotten changed up a little bit, do some things, but it was the guys who were the 7, 8, 9 who really got the job done, especially Lane Thomas. He was fantastic yesterday. What'd you think though? What'd you think of the lineup? And that shook it up. They decided to go with Cesar at 1. They went with what was it? It was Ruiz at 2, and then Soto at 3, followed by Nelson Cruz, and they bumped a very much slumping Josh Bell to 5th, and so then kind of things fell normally after that. What'd you think about the lineup change?
Yeah, I really liked moving K-Bear up to the 2 spot. Look, I'm a proponent of hitting Soto in the 2 spot, considering his on-base percentage. I mean, that's just where you should have your guy with the highest OBP. With Hernandez kind of profiling as that leadoff guy, I think that it made a lot of sense to put Soto at 2. But he's admitted he's felt weird this year, and he's also talked about how it's been an adjustment for him hitting in the number 2 spot after primarily hitting 3rd in his career. Look, maybe it isn't a fit for him. Maybe it isn't something he's comfortable doing. Just because it makes sense analytically, doesn't mean it necessarily makes sense for the player. Right. So if this is something that the Nationals want to try, look, it's not like their offense is, blowing anybody out of the water right now. Shake things up, sure. And Keibert Ruiz deserves it. I mean, he's been awesome in that kind of that 6, 7 spot in the order. He really has pushed up his on-base percentage. I tweeted this out yesterday, but among players 23 and younger, Juan Soto leads major leagues in on-base percentage, and Keibert Ruiz is number 2. I mean, the Nationals have 2 of the best young on-base getters in all of baseball, if we want to put it that way. So to have the 2 of them next to each other in the lineup, I think makes a lot of sense. Ruiz isn't exactly hitting for power right now. That's something that he did last year, but it was also kind of new for him. He broke out in AAA, hit a bunch of home runs, but for most of his minor league career, he really hadn't been doing that. So he profiles more as a guy who, just gets on base, draws his walks, doesn't strike out a ton. And that's exactly what you look for out of a number 2 hitter. So I'm all for it. I think it made a lot of sense, and it just kind of added some length to the lineup. And not to say that one game is indicative of any results,
Right.
but, certainly the Nationals aren't going to complain about scoring 8 runs after they hadn't even scored that many in their previous 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, they have to shake things up. Why not? You're 14-28. You have to be doing things like that, I think, in my opinion, and putting young guys in good spots. And yet, the analytics are always something, and we should always pay attention to them. Yes, but like if a guy says, "I don't feel natural here," right? And this happens a lot with, I think, closers. There are a lot of guys who you're like, "You are our best reliever," and they're like, "I do not want to close. I that's not where I like to be." And
Daniel Hudson.
Yeah, Daniel Hudson, exactly. And you have to respect that.
We'll
right?
see tonight.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to respect that. You have to acknowledge that. And so maybe I think this is a good change. And Gabert's been really good lately, especially too. Let's talk a little pitching here. So I have to mention this. Erick Fedde, I know it wasn't like some blow you out of the water, really good start that he made. I mean, I thought it was pretty strong for him in the last start against the Brewers. I think it was 5 2/3, ends up giving up 2 runs, both earners off a homer, 3 walks, 4 Ks, 97 pitches. I just want to say what he's done this month has been really impressive because the 4 teams he's faced, Matt, Milwaukee, Houston, the Angels, and Colorado in Colorado. So I just think that he deserves a lot of credit for what he has done these last 4 starts. These are not easy teams he's facing, and on over the course of the month, he has a 2.49 ERA. So I just think Erick Fedde has done really well, and I think that obviously the walks are always an issue for him because he's a guy who does nibble around the plate a lot. But I think actually that approach with these lineups he's been facing has benefited him more often than not. Now it's against the teams like the Marlins. You're like, dude, we can attack the zone a bit more here against some of these guys, right? But against these teams, that kind of not going to give you a ton of stuff to hit. It does work out sometimes, and I think it's worked out in his last 4 starts. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for as of late, he's probably been their most consistent pitcher.
Yeah, I think Erick Fedde is at his best when he's getting ground balls, and he's averaged just under 8 ground ball outs per start over this course of this month here. He now leads the team in ERA among their pitching staff. I mean, this was kind of a make or break year for Fedde. He's out of options. If the Nationals rotation was healthy at the beginning of the year, there's no guarantee he even breaks camp in the rotation. And with guys like Steven Strasburg, Joe Ross, Anibal Sanchez all working their way back, he is pitching well enough to warrant consideration of sticking in the rotation even after those guys come back. I mean,
Right.
There's going to be a roster crunch for sure. And I think we're going to probably see Aaron Sanchez get cut loose, and Yohan Adon get sent back to the minors for a little bit more seasoning. But that last spot in the rotation, once Anibal Sanchez is ready, that's going to be kind of the big question mark of, is it Erick Fedde that's going to go down? Probably not. You're not going to obviously knock Josiah Gray or Patrick Corbin out of the rotation. So it's probably going to come to a question of, is Anibal willing to come out of the bullpen? If Fedde is continuing to pitch like he has. So he's been quietly effective. He's not going super deep into games. I think that's something that he's really struggled with throughout his career is facing lineups the third time through. And if he can try to get through that a little bit better, mix up his pitches a little bit more, maybe he gives the Nationals some more length. And hey, maybe Erick Fedde is a player that gets some trade consideration at the trade deadline this year. The Nationals, I don't think they see him as a part of their future. So he's probably somebody who, could be a back end starter, or maybe somebody, a long reliever that a team's looking for, and can fill multiple roles, because he's done both and succeeded at both at times throughout his career. We saw him down the stretch last year actually pitch some of the best starts that we've ever seen. So he's kind of just carrying that over. He's doesn't have crazy numbers, but certainly has been one of the Nationals' more effective starters.
Well, it's really funny because I've been thinking about this idea of like people always stack their rotations up and say, oh, this is, our best 5 looks pretty good. You never get your best 5, right? Because we thought about this last year. Hey, we thought going into the last couple seasons that Erick Fedde could have been on the outside looking in, right? Of both years. And it turns out in the last 2 seasons now, he has made 35 starts. So, talk about, okay, outside looking in, like these things never work out the way you thought. And so I think there is something to be said for a guy who's been there, been available. No, he has not been fantastic, but when everybody else, the Nationals, pitching at this point, I mean, best ability at some perspectives is availability, right? That's kind of what they need right now. And he's been available, and it's, yes, he's had his moments where it's not going very well, but he's been available and he's been solid. And so I think you're right. He's a good trade asset. I mean, I feel like at this point too, that you almost have to hold on to him because of the way he's occupying a spot every 5 days. The Nationals have just had so many problems with that. So I understand why, you might be tempted to move him. Somebody's worth giving, going to give you something worth it. That's fine. But, you know, me, Matt, I've said a lot, like the Josh Bell extension thing was just like, it's one less thing you have to worry about on a team that has so much to worry about. And I do think at some point there is some value there in that.
You're absolutely right. There is, but I do think that the Nationals, with where their pitchers are in the minor leagues right now, they are going to want to give some opportunities to some young guys down the stretch and get them their first taste of the major leagues. Cade Cavalli, even though he hasn't been pitching great in AAA Rochester, did just go 5 innings, 1 hit yesterday. He's somebody that the Nationals probably want to see in the majors at some point. Cole Henry is a guy who has been pitching very well, though they've been really babying him because of his injuries last year. So he has to kind of build up that pitch count before he could really be a candidate to make the majors. But he's somebody I think the Nationals want to see. And somebody who isn't really getting a lot of attention is Evan Lee, who in AA Harrisburg this season has a 2.88 ERA in 6 starts. The Nationals added him to their 40-man roster over the offseason last year. So he's somebody who they can call up right away. And the Nationals have, as we know, never shied away from calling up anybody straight from AA. So I think that he's somebody we might see in the majors before the end of the year. So there's a lot of these young guys that, the Nationals want to give opportunities to. Yes, it means that you're going to need, your long relievers in the bullpen. Maybe a guy like Erasmo Ramirez doesn't get traded because he just has been so valuable for the Nationals, giving them multiple innings in his outings. Like, that's somebody I think that would make sense to hold on to. Josh Rogers, maybe not as effective, but he kind of does the same thing, can bridge a starter to the late innings if need be. So I don't think that anybody is off the table if they're a free agent after this year, as much as the Nationals need the innings. There are some young guys on the way, and I think we're going to see them before the season's out.
Yeah, I think that just the injuries for the Nationals, it's been so rough, with all these guys getting hurt. I mean, I thought Ross was looking really solid last year, and the injury happens, right? Strasburg, the injury happens. They bring in Sanchez, the injury happes. I mean, you talk about Cole Henry, the injuries, like they've just been snake bitten ever since. And look, they, in a lot of ways, they got very fortunate, right? It wasn't like that in the World Series season. And at some points it does come back to bite you. They're fighting through that. What are you looking forward to in the Dodgers series? I always love it when teams get to play, bad teams get to play really good teams. I know it's like free wins probably for the Dodgers. They love it too. But it is nice to see like guys like Walker Buehler roll into town. You know what I mean? Get to see great players. And also, obviously, this will be a little bit of a reunion as Trey Turner is returning to DC as well. So that's always a really interesting thing to see now at the post-trade deadline. Your thoughts on the Dodgers coming to the town, and what are you looking forward to watching?
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, Trey Turner and, of course, Daniel Hudson both coming back to DC for the first time since being traded at the deadline last year. It's going to be Josiah Gray's first chance to face the team that traded him. He's going to be starting the second game facing Walker Buehler. That's going to be a great matchup. Keibert Ruiz, of course, also facing the team that never really would give him opportunity in the major league level. The presence of Will Smith really blocked him for years from reaching the majors. And, Ruiz was obviously traded. That's something that, after the team never really gave you that chance in the majors, after he was probably ready to make the majors for at least 2 years before he was finally called up. I think that maybe that's some extra motivation for him. I don't know. We'll see how he does. But yeah, this is a really good team. Mookie Betts is absolutely rolling coming into the season. He's on a home run tear. So that's going to be something to watch. They're a little bit banged up. Actually, the Dodgers aren't really cruising right now. They've been knocked down a little bit. So this is actually a series they probably need to at least take 2 out of 3 in to kind of regather themselves. But this is a very good team. The World Series favorites coming into the year. The Nationals know them well. Luckily, Max Scherzer won't be pitching for them as would have happened last year had they faced them. But ultimately, this is going to be a good series to watch, even if the Nationals aren't necessarily going to be competitive throughout.
Yeah, and I always say this, like, if you are a team with the Dodgers, like, this is actually where your division's won and lost. It's not those games against the Padres, right? You might have, back and forth with teams like that. That's usually how those things shake out, right? It's a lot of times it's like, we see this all the time in the NL East. the Marlins kicked our ass, so we couldn't win the division, right? It's how you play against Cincinnati, and it's how you play against DC. It's how you play against teams like that right now that really can decide, if you win your division, right? I mean, dropping 2 of 3 here, like it's just one of those things where, it's like, man, we could have flipped the National series. Like, how do we lose that one? Because the Nationals have won 6 straight series, I believe they've dropped right now.
The AL East last year, the order of the top 4 teams was identical to the winning percentage of each of those teams against the Orioles last year. So that just kind of shows you it was just how much, if you beat up on the Orioles enough, you won the division.
I mean,
that's how
when you
close
play that many
these things
games,
are.
when you play that many games, it's like you just have to do it. Like, you know what I mean? You gotta, if you can punch somebody in the head like 20 times, go ahead and do it, right? Just go ahead and keep kicking the what out of the Orioles. I will say one kind of final note here. I like it when young guys get challenges against good lineups, right? Josiah Gray, like these will keep coming, and sometimes they've gone well, sometimes they haven't, but it's fine because he's so young. So I think that's always important. Adone, but him to a lesser extent. Josiah Gray is more of like all right, we know you're staying up in the majors, right? We need you. This is another one of those good challenges. I always like seeing that.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Josiah faced the Astros lineup 2 outings ago, really struggled early on, but then settled in. He then rode that start into a nice one against the Marlins. So if he can, kind of carry that momentum, I think we could be seeing a really good pitching matchup, of course, with the added, juice that comes with facing your former team. I think that this could be a really great series to watch. I'm going to all 3 games. I'm very excited. Nice. So should be a fun week.
All right, Matt, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on a lot. I'm going to be talking. Actually, I don't want to spoil it. I've got a story coming out this week, but it is going to be a pretty good one, and I think taking an angle that not a lot of people have taken in recent weeks. So I'm excited for doing that. So probably the next time we talk, it'll be out, and we can kind of dive into that. So stay tuned. But you can check out my work on NBCSportsWashington.com, and I'm on Twitter @ByMattWeyrich.
Awesome. Matt Weyrich, NBC Sports Washington. We appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much.
No problem, man. Anytime.